Well, hey folks, welcome back. Glad to have you back. We're continuing our lesson on being, or our unit on being an authentic church. 6 lessons where we're exploring some of the characteristics of an authentic or New Testament or biblical church. Today we're going to be talking about this matter of worshiping God. Now, I don't normally do this, but occasionally I will find myself taking a lesson in a little bit different direction than the curriculum goes. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that the curriculum is wrong or bad. It just means I'm going to bring a different perspective to it. So I'm going to point out today or affirm what I think is a point, how I would teach this lesson. The point of the lesson that's a little bit different from the curriculum, and that's okay. Do whatever you think is best for your class. But from my perspective, the point of this lesson is that the authentic church, which is what we're talking about, the authentic church worships with humility and wisdom. The authentic church worships with humility and wisdom. We're going to see how that plays out in the text in just a moment. Now, to start the class, I think I would choose to ask this question. I would ask my class, how does, or what do you think? I would just ask the members, what do you think about the worship wars of recent years? Now, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, over the last 2 or 3 decades, as a new generation has come up in the church, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding how the church should worship. And a lot of churches have gotten into significant trouble. It's become very divisive in many situations. Should we be traditional? Should we be more contemporary? Should we sing hymns? Should we sing choruses? Should we have a choir? Just a praise band? So a lot of tension, a lot of division in many churches, unfortunately, over this issue of the worship wars. Now, don't ask this question if you think it's going to start a fight in your class. Don't go there. But if you can manage it, I think it's okay to let people say what they think. Just kick it around a little bit. Talk about it. What do you think about the worship wars that have taken place in the church in the last couple of decades? A lot of people might have very strong opinions. Now, the lesson is not going to answer the question, should we do traditional worship or contemporary worship? That's, excuse me, that is not the point of the lesson. But this question will help highlight the fact that people have opinions about how the church should worship. So it helps establish the fact, that question helps establish the fact that worship is significant in the church. So the lesson then takes on added significance. Okay, let's jump into the text. We're going to be looking at Psalm 34, and it's been broken up into three different texts, verses 1 through 3, then we're skipping over to 8 through 10, and then skipping over to 15 through 18, okay? But all taken from Psalm 34. All right, let's look at the first text. Psalm 34, verses 1 through 3. He says, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. I will boast in the Lord. The humble will hear and be glad. Proclaim the Lord's greatness with me. Let us exalt his name together. The thing I would point out about this first text is the emphasis where he says, the humble will hear and be glad. And then I would ask this question. This is what I would ask my class. How does humility relate to worship? Now, that should be pretty obvious, but I would let people respond. How does humility relate to worship? Well, when we come into worship, we are there for only one person. That's the Lord. We're not coming to give praise to anybody else. We're there to worship him and him alone. So when we come to worship, the church needs to come with an attitude of humility. We need to be humble when we approach worship. Anytime we bring a spirit of arrogance to worship or anything else we do, we are in fact diminishing the person of God because we are exalting ourselves. Biblical worship, authentic worship says, Jesus, God, you are the focus. I must come humbly, because what we're doing during this time of worship, whether it's corporate worship, personal worship, whatever it is, what is happening during worship is not about me. It is about you, God. So this passage, I think, underscores the role of humility in worship. It's not complicated. The text isn't complicated. It's not particularly challenging in what it says. It just underscores the fact that the authentic church worships with humility and wisdom. And if we don't bring humility to the church, or excuse me, to worship, then something is wrong with our worship. We can't claim it or call it biblical, New Testament, authentic worship if we come with a spirit of arrogance. Okay, let's look at the next text. Psalm 34, 8 through 10. He says, "Taste and see that the Lord is good. How happy is the person who takes refuge in him. You who are his holy ones, fear the Lord. For those who fear him lack nothing. Young lions lack food and go hungry, but those who seek the Lord will not lack any good thing." Now remember, I said the point of the lesson is that the authentic church worships with humility and wisdom. So where am I finding wisdom in this text? Well, look at the text again, these verses again, and ask yourself, is there anything about these verses that seems a little bit off to you? Not quite right. For example, when he says, those, in verse 9, for those who fear him lack nothing. Have you ever had the sense that you lacked something, that your life didn't have everything you wanted it to have? Young lions, verse 10, young lions lack food and go hungry, but those who seek the Lord will not lack any good thing. Do you ever get a sense in your life that there are good things missing? So how do we approach that? How do we understand how, on the one hand, the psalmist is saying, if you will worship, if you will trust in the Lord, if you will walk with the Lord, if you will fear the Lord, you will lack nothing. Well, we hear that and we all kind of go, well, he doesn't mean we're going to have everything we want. That's because when we approach verses, verses like this, we bring to the verse a degree of wisdom. And when we come to worship, we bring a degree of wisdom. We understand that the provision of God in our lives is not defined by the circumstances, and it's not defined by what we think we want, and not even by what we think we need. We understand when we worship God, one of the things we're accomplishing, one of the things we're doing is we're saying, God, you know what is best in my life. God, you know what I need in my life. That's wisdom. And we have to do that. If we come to worship with the attitude that, hey, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to pray, and I'm just going to trust that God gives me everything I want. Even if we don't say it that way, sometimes we come to worship with this expectation that if we just push all the right buttons, God is going to do the things we want him to do. Well, folks, if you are a parent, you understand already that parents, we cannot give our children everything that they want, and we can't even give them everything that they think they need. We have to use discernment because we know better than they do what is in their best interest. And when we worship, biblical worship says, God, you know better than I do what I need. And in that sense, his provision is complete. God always does what is best for us, even if it doesn't feel like it to me, even if it doesn't feel like it to you. God's provision is always good. God's provision is always right. And when we look at what God is doing in our lives through the lens of his sovereignty, and the fact that he always knows what is best, then we can come and worship, and we can say, those who fear the Lord lack nothing, when we understand that the something that God is providing is really what we need, what is truly in our best interest. So, the authentic church worships with humility and wisdom. Now let's look at the last text. He says, the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous. He sees us. He knows us. He hears us. His ears are open to their cry for help. The face of the Lord is set against those who do what is evil, to remove all memory of them from the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears, and rescues them from all their troubles. The Lord is near the brokenhearted. He saves those crushed in spirit. Again, much the same thing as we saw in the last verse, last text. When God looks at us, when God deals with us, when God sees us, he sees what we truly need. And he accomplishes for us, he provides for us what we truly need, what is truly in our best interest. So we have to say, when we read verse 17, the righteous cry out and the Lord hears. He rescues them from all their troubles. Do you ever feel as though you have troubles and have not been rescued from those troubles? Have you known people who had troubles and died as a result of those troubles? What do we say to that? Well, we have to understand that God is a big God. God is a sovereign God. He knows what is right, what is best for me and for every other person. So God always does what is right, even though we don't understand it. We bring wisdom to our worship. The Lord is near the brokenhearted. He saves those crushed in spirit. Yes, sometimes circumstances come against us and they crush our spirit. But God, in his wisdom and in his love and his sovereignty, he's able to accomplish what we need him to do in our lives so that we can say, no matter how we feel, no matter what the circumstances are, we can say he is doing what is best. We can worship him in authentic worship. We can worship him because we know that he knows best, as these verses affirm, and make the point that the authentic church worships with humility and wisdom. Thanks for listening.